So in this video I want to talk a lot about the hands, or I want to talk solely about the hands coming in towards the downswing position, because I think there's a little bit of a misconception about this and people sometimes lose a little bit of the idea of what they're supposed to be doing with their arms in the downswing. And admittedly, the arms aren't the only thing that functions in the golf swing, you know, meaning that obviously your body and how your body moves will sort of influence how your arms behave. But fundamentally, the thing that most amateur golfers struggle with is the thing that I'm going to highlight in today's video. So what I want to do first is I want to kind of just show, whilst I'm sort of demonstrating this, just a little comparison, a little swing here of Tiger Woods in the pre-impact area. Okay, now this is the kind of thing that I'm always trying to get a lot of my students to sort of improve and work on. Now, what happens in the golf swing, if we sort of focus a little bit on the forearm, is we have a pronatory motion and a supinatory motion, right? So basically the forearm rolls. Now, a pronatory motion helps us keep the club on plane. But as we come in towards the late downswing, there has to be, and obviously progressively, but there has to be an element of supinatory motion to square the face. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. So if we take a look at Tiger, by the time he brings the club down and the club shaft is parallel, you see the way the hands are located over the golf ball. And then if we take him to the next stage, as that club starts to again further uncock, which means the wrists naturally go this way, you can still see the way his hands are further ahead. So his hands are kind of located over his left ankle line at this point in the swing. Now what happens between here and impact is that supinatory motion. So you can see the way that if I was wearing a watch, you guys could still see it. And then as I come in towards this impact, see the way that the back of my left arm just rolls, okay? So just like this. And that's what squares that face. Now, I think the reason why most amateur golfers don't do this is because obviously it's quite scary. It's scary to feel like your hands are ahead of the club head before the club head has actually hit the golf ball. But that's what needs to happen. Now, like I said, there are lots of other things that influence how we hit the ball. You know, our body rotation. And when we trigger enough body rotation, like so, rotate back and through, you can see the way that when we rotate, my shoulder moves up. So there are lots of things which are going to have an influence. But what happens, I think, is that too many people fall into the narrative of, well, if I move my body correctly, my hands and arms will follow. Well, that's just not true, right? They're a separate entity on their own. I work with loads of golfers that actually pivot really well, but the hands are still too wide. And you can play around with this. You can obviously move your hands and arms in space, right? And that's what you need to be focusing on and thinking of. So it's the big thing that most amateur golfers don't do. And the reason why is because, like I say, it's a scary thing to do. It's a scary thing to get those hands moving over the ball when the club shaft is parallel and even further forward by the time. And like I say, the reason why, well, the uncocking motion, this motion here is going to happen naturally, but the rotation won't. You have to think about the rotation. But this is why you get, with better golfers, you get that sort of feeling that they talk about squeezing the golf ball and getting the hands forward. Is for exactly the reasons that I've suggested. You've got to focus on swinging up to the top of your backswing position, starting the downswing, but then really from about left arm horizontal to coming when the club is parallel, you need to be thinking about getting those hands over the golf ball, or if not, even ahead of the golf ball. And that is a key thing. Now, just quickly from the sidearm perspective, let's just introduce a plane line here, because what needs to happen is as I bring my hands in, you can have your hands further out, but you've still got to bring them over the ball. And obviously what I'm trying to say is one of the motions that happens naturally is the uncocking, which is this motion of the club. Now, when the club starts to unclock, you can see the way the club face looks different. So the feeling will be that your club face is going to be wide open. But in reality, because the club will be uncocking, the club face won't be as open as it feels, if that sort of makes sense. So you have to, and I get with my students, they're like, okay, they can see their hands are normally about here, and that means they hit it a bit this way. They need to get the hands more here. And the question generally is, well, how do they do that? And obviously, like I say, you work a little bit on your rotation, but you also just need to grow in confidence of trying to get your hands ahead of the ball when you make contact with it, and trusting the fact that as you come in towards this very late, that it's just a little bit of left arm rotation that squares the face. And if you can learn this skill, then you're going to have a huge amount of progress in your game. And just start when you're learning this skill with just some wedges. Get the hands forward coming into those wedges. Film it, get some feedback, reach out for lessons, reach out for help. But it is the one thing that I think most amateur golfers can't do. And it is something that you need to do if you want to become a much better golfer. See you soon.